One of the most important photography techniques is subject separation. You can use your camera to shoot a shallow depth of field to create that separation between your subject and your background, but you can even use post-processing to create that isolation and have that subject pop out from your photo. Let's take a look at how we can do this in a few simple steps in Lightroom Classic. So right here I have a photo of Diamond Beach in Iceland. Obviously a lot of ice and a lot of contrast between the black sand and the white ice. And this to me looks like a bit of a tricky photo to edit. And it really needs some subject separation because the background is grayish and it's cloudy, very cloudy, and the ice has that dark contrast in it, which makes it look like a very flat image. Now let's take a look at how we can edit it to make the subject pop out a bit more. So first and foremost, I'm going to do some basic adjustments, and then we're going to go ahead and create some local adjustments on the ice itself, on the background, and on the clouds and the foreground as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable profile correction in order to make sure that I have the correct lens profile enabled. Then I'm going to play around with the exposure, shadows, and highlights to make sure that I have the correct contrast to work with. I'm going to increase shadows by a bit and decrease highlights, decrease the blacks a bit, and increase the whites. I'm going to introduce a bit of clarity, just slightly. So that already looks better, but now we have to do some local adjustments. So first and foremost, I'm going to use a linear gradient in the sky just to increase the drama and have those dark looking clouds coming in. So decrease the exposure and blacks, and decrease the highlights. And right here I'm going to decrease the haze and increase texture and clarity. Then I'm going to create a new mask, which will be a radial gradient, and we'll put the radial gradient at the back where the sky is lighter and it's brighter. Now I'm going to subtract the subject from this gradient, and as you can see, it's going to select just the background. And I'm going to increase a bit of contrast right here as well. Okay. One more thing I would like to do, because at this point I can see that there are a bit of blue colors in the background and in the ice itself, which I'm not really liking at the moment. So I'm going to remove all the colors from the HSL panel and remove all the saturation to edit in black and white. Now, I'm also going to create another mask. I'm going to select the subject, which will be the piece of ice itself, and this little piece of rock right here. But I can see that this little piece of rock is not completely selected. So I'm going to add a brush selection and paint over it just a bit to make sure that it's selected properly. Now I'm going to increase exposure, decrease the highlights a bit, and increase the whites. Now the subject is already slightly popping out from the photo because we've reduced the highlights in the background and increased the highlights in the foreground in the subject itself. But to increase the separation, I'm going to go back to this mask, which is the lighter area of the background, and I'm going to increase the feather by a bit, and I'm going to decrease the exposure a bit further to have that extra separation. Next thing I would like to do is create another mask. As you can see, we're going to use masks a lot here. a radial gradient in front of the ice right here, and I'm going to increase texture and clarity because I can see that there are these waves right here which will create a very nice texture. I can also see that there's some nice texture in the sand itself in the foreground, and I would like to make that texture pop out a bit as well. So I'm going to create a new mask. I'm going to put a radial gradient which comes from the bottom right corner upwards towards my subject, and I'm going to increase texture and clarity, and I'm going to reduce shadows by a bit and increase the whites. Now I'm quite happy with this result, but I'm going back to mask 3, which is the one where I selected my subject and the piece of rock up here, and I'm going to play about with the amount of the edit that I made. And I can see that I can increase the exposure and I can increase the edit, which makes the subject pop out a little bit, but my reflection right here is not showing that much. So I'm going to create yet again another mask, but this time I'm going to paint over the reflection itself. I'm going to reduce a bit of flow and density in order to select the edges with a bit of feather. And now I'm going to increase exposure and highlights to make sure I have that nice white reflection. One last thing I would like to do is another radial gradient at the back of the sea right here, and I'm going to subtract my subject from it, and I'm going to create a similar effect to what I created in the highlights of the sky. So I'm going to reduce exposure by a bit, not too much, and now there's a bit of more separation between the sea itself and the ice as well. So two final things I would like to do is crop the image to a more desirable look, straighten it out a bit. This looks pretty good in my opinion, and I'm going to put a bit of sharpness on the final image. So reduce radius and increase the amount of sharpness and some detail. I've used the same technique to edit yet another photo of the same beach, and this time I created a more dramatic sky, a darker background, and a darker leading black sand sort of towards the ice. And around the ice there's that nice little wave which creates that extra drama and that extra contrast, which makes the photo pop out much further. If we compare it to the original shot, you can see that beyond just the subject and the little wave going around it, the photo was very, very boring, and it was really a flat photo. And now we've created this really dramatic feel, which looks like a piece of art, literally. So I hope you like these tips and tricks, and please make sure to like and subscribe for similar content. Thank you for watching.